Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, I'm David Kramer here with your Alaska weather. As always, please visit our website, arh.noaa.gov. Get any updates to our forecast there. You can check out any watches, warnings, advisories that we have out for the state. You can also call our weather info line, 1-800-472-0391. Updates to the forecast through that means as well. And we have our Facebook account, our Twitter account, and our YouTube account. You can check us out on any or all of those means. Taking a look now at our warnings for the state, just two warnings out. They are both in the south central. They're in the Anchorage area extending up towards the Matanuska Valley, and both of those are freeze warnings, and they are in effect tonight from 3 a.m. until 8 a.m. For more specifics on what that really means and how low those temperatures are going to get, go check out our website and you can look at all the information on those warnings there. Taking a look now at our satellites, we'll start off in the west. Our first low pressure is way out there west of the western Aleutian Islands, bringing a lot of cloud cover and some rain to the western Aleutians. And there's remnants of that front that are extending down over the central Bering Sea. And we'll watch as another low spins up on that frontal boundary there, headed towards the Pribilof Islands, and a new front now extending down south near the eastern Aleutian Islands. Warm front going out more towards the Alaska Peninsula there, and cloud cover starting to make its way over the southwest part of the state, but the rain is still a little bit behind that further towards the Pribilof Islands. Taking a look now over the main part of the state, we had a lot of lower clouds out there early in the morning, but as the sun came up, we'll watch as those started to diminish and starting to clear out the skies through much of mainland Alaska. Even down in the Panhandle, we don't have a whole lot of activity, just a low that's south of Ketchikan area there, bringing in some showers to the very southern part of the Panhandle, but the central part's even starting to clear out with some more cloud cover as we get further to the north, extending out towards the Whitehorse area. So look now at our weather for the remainder of the day. We do have that low down there with some showers spinning around that thing, and then we are starting to see more clear skies as we get further to the north, but then cloud cover returning as we get up along the North Gulf coastline. But out over mainland Alaska, high pressure does dominate, and that is going to make way for the clear skies throughout the central and western portions of the state. Still some cloud cover, however, out over areas to the east. As we get north of the Brooks Range or along the Arctic coastline, going to see some isolated showers up there by Barrow. As we move down the coast, though, we do see our main system pushing into the central Bering Sea, bringing some rain to the Pribilof Islands, extending to the southeast into the Alaska Peninsula. And then we have some rain behind this system with some fog mixed in for the western Aleutian Islands and western parts of the Bering Sea. As we move into the tonight hours, this front has started to push more to the north and east, beginning to bring rain to the coastline, especially as we get past midnight into those early morning hours out there. Some rain and fog mixed in. Lower Kuskokwim Valley just going to see some patchy fog in the morning. As we move down with behind this system, we do have a lot of rain and fog extending now towards the Pribilof Islands with some more steady rain as we get to the Alaska Peninsula. Out over mainland Alaska, our high pressure starting to shift off to the east, but with the clear skies that we're going to have, a lot of places those temperatures are going to drop down below freezing, especially in the interior, but that is going to extend, as we saw with the freeze warnings tonight, down as far south as the Anchorage Bowl area. Along the Arctic coastline, however, we're going to continue to see a lot of the cloud cover with some shower activity from Barrow and further off to the west. Down in the Panhandle area, our low pressure is starting to push off to the east, but still going to see some lingering isolated showers in the very southern portions of the Panhandle, but just a lot of cloud cover as we get further to the north towards the Yakutat area. As we move into Wednesday, continuing to see the lingering showers in the very southern parts of the Panhandle and just the cloud cover extending further to the northwest, but our high pressure pushing off even further to the east now, moving the area of clear skies out further to the east as well. That's going to extend down into the south central through much of the interior. But again, as we get north of the Brooks Range, going to see cloud cover returning with some isolated areas of showers up by the Barrow area. But our main frontal system now has pushed over the western parts of the state, bringing the rain further inland now, up to as far north as just to the south of Galena. And then we also have some of that rain starting to make its way towards the Nome area, but widespread rain and fog expected with the system as it passes through the southwest part of the state, down through Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. And behind the system, some more isolated areas of rain and fog extending now through almost all of the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands. As we move into Thursday, the main low there, now closer towards the Bering Strait, starting to diminish with its front just troughing out, bringing in some rain, however, to places a little bit further north through the Galena area now. And we even have some of that rain possible as far north as the Kotzebue Sound. But a lot of areas of rain and fog south of that old system, but we have a new low that has come up from the south towards the Bristol Bay area, bringing in more widespread rain back to the Bristol Bay area, down through Kodiak Island, and through much of the south central now as far east as the Copper River Basin. Out over the Bering Sea, though, we're going to continue to see the rain and fog with that west-southwest flow. Out over the northern part of the state with our high pressure starting to get off over the Arctic now, starting to see clearer skies along the Arctic coastline and not expecting to see any of that rain lingering any longer on Thursday. Down in the Panhandle as well, they're going to clear out as some of this ridging has pushed off over them, and going to see some clear and nice skies on Thursday for the Panhandle. Taking a look at our temperatures for this afternoon, in the mid to upper 50s, some places getting to around 60, with Ketchikan, Sitka, and Yakutat all around 60 degrees this afternoon. Klawock 61 degrees, 59 degrees for the Skagway area. And as we move into the south central, pretty similar temperatures actually, upper 50s to right around 60 degrees. Cordova a little bit warmer, 63 there, 63 at Kodiak as well. Homer 56, Talkeetna and Seward both 61, and 54 for Glen Allen, a little bit colder there. Moving up into the interior now, temperatures in the upper 40s to lower 50s. Some of the coldest places, we have Delta Junction there, 46 degrees, as well as Arctic Village. Through the pass, colder still, 39 degrees there. Taking us up to the Arctic coastline. Coldest out east with Kaktovik 36 degrees, Dead Horse 37, but as we get closer towards Barrow and further to the west, temperatures steadily climbing towards 50 at Point Hope. Then down in the Kotzebue Sound area, upper 40s to lower 50s there with Kotzebue at 53 degrees, Tin City a little colder, 46 degrees. In the lower 50s for the Norton Sound area, Nome colder there at 50 degrees. Gamble out there at St. Lawrence Island, 48 degrees for this afternoon. Down in the southwest part of the state, mid to upper 50s, and that's going to be true down into the Bristol Bay area as well. The exceptions are a little bit warmer there at King Salmon, 60 degrees, Iliamna 61 degrees, Lime Village a little bit colder there, 49 degrees this afternoon. Then down in the Aleutian Islands, in the mid to lower 50s for the most part. Dutch Harbor a little bit warmer, as we can see the effects from that warmer air coming up from the south with our warm front 63 degrees this afternoon. And then St. Paul 52, St. George 54 this afternoon. Taking a look at our lows for tonight, down around 50 degrees out in the central and western Aleutian Islands, getting warm or getting colder as we get closer towards the Bristol Bay area. Down in the 40s, Dillingham going down to 45 degrees tonight, into the mid to lower 40s as we get into the YK Delta area. Bethel down to 41 degrees, and pretty rapidly dropping off as we get over the main part of the state with those clear skies, that high pressure sitting overhead. But for the Seward Peninsula area, right around 44 degrees for most locations there. Warmer at Gamble, 47 degrees tonight. Then along the Arctic coastline, we have temperatures into the right around 40 degrees out west, but dropping down below freezing as we get further off to the east, with Dead Horse down as low as 30 degrees tonight, 32 degrees at Kaktovik, And then many places throughout much of the central and eastern interior are going to see temperatures at or below freezing, with the coldest being Arctic Village dropping all the way down to 22 degrees for tonight. Fairbanks going right down to freezing at 32 degrees. Eagle down to 25 degrees. And as we move down south of the Alaska Range, some places to the north dropping below freezing, 30 degrees for Talkeetna, 29 for Glen Allen. And then we have temperatures staying above freezing as we get out over the Kenai Peninsula, 35 degrees for Kenai and Seward tonight. Down in the Panhandle, we do have temperatures dropping into the 40s, with some locations dropping down just below to 39 degrees. 37 is the lowest for Yakutat for tonight. Highs for tomorrow getting right back up to around 60 degrees, with Klawock getting up to as high as 62 degrees tomorrow, 62 for the Skagway and Haines areas tomorrow. As we move out over the south central, getting up into the lower 60s. Glen Allen staying a little bit colder, 57 degrees for a high tomorrow. Getting into the lower 60s in the interior as well. The exception out east going to stay a little bit colder into the mid 50s there. Then up right around 40 degrees high for Kaktovik, coldest out east along the Arctic coastline. Getting up right around 50 degrees for places out to the west. Kivalina getting up to 60 degrees for tomorrow, and then right around the mid 50s around the Seward Peninsula, and that's going to be true in the YK Delta area as well. A little bit warmer up to the upper 50s as we get into the Bristol Bay area. Right around 60 degrees for Cold Bay there, and for False Pass 59 degrees, and into the mid 50s for the remainder of the Aleutian Islands, with St. Paul getting up to 53 degrees for tomorrow. Flying weather for tomorrow, we start off with our IFR, MVFR, widespread conditions out through the Bering Sea with a lot of the fog and low stratus that we see out there. And as that front approaches the coastline, we are going to see those MVFR conditions continuing to push further inland, with some of the areas throughout much of the Norton Sound area becoming IFR. Off the Arctic coastline, most of the MVFR conditions should stay further to the north, but some of those could push in over the Barrow area, Kaktovik areas. But much of mainland Alaska should be pretty clear, and VFR conditions are expected. And that does include the Panhandle as well, VFR conditions expected. And we'll see this reflected in our pass charts, where all the passes are going to be VFR. Anaktuvik VFR, Adigan Pass VFR, as well as Lake Clark and Merrill. Rainy Pass should be visual flight rules, as well as Windy Pass. Isabel Pass will also be VFR. Mentasta Pass VFR, conditions expected. Tanita as well. Portage VFR for tomorrow, and Chilkoot and White should both be VFR for tomorrow. Taking a look now at our freezing levels, we can see some of those surface freezing levels under some of our higher levels, as we have that high pressure overhead going to leave a lot of those colder temperatures, especially in the morning hours, below freezing there. But as we get up, we are going to see the coldest spots out over northwestern Canada. But out ahead of our frontal system, we are going to see some of those warmer temperatures, resulting in those higher freezing levels coming in with our warm front, 12,000 feet over the Alaska Peninsula. As we look now at our icing, with a lot of those warmer temperatures, as our icing will be much further to the north as well in those colder areas, above 15,000 feet extending from the Seward Peninsula through the Kotzebue Sound area. And then along the Arctic coastline from Barrow to the east, we are going to see some areas of icing above 10,000 feet there. Taking a look at our jet for tomorrow, northwesterly jet coming to the south of the Aleutian Islands there at about 90 knots. And we have, as we move out over the Alaska Peninsula, southwesterly direction, 95-knot jet, pushing into the southwest and then through the south central before exiting out of a northerly direction into the Gulf of Alaska, 105 knots there, then out over back into the U.S. and Canada eventually at 110 knots. Out over the northern part of the state, westerly flow there, 80 knots for that jet. As we look down at 9,000 feet now, high pressure out over the state, so we can see a lot of the ridging with our wind flow here. Pretty weak near the high, 5 to 15 knots, and then that's going to pick up as we get over the Panhandle, 25 knots there. A little bit stronger over the Gulf, as high as 35 knots in the southern Gulf. And then out over the Bering Sea, we are going to see some southwesterly flow. Weaker as we get closer towards mainland Alaska, but stronger winds up to as high as 25 knots out over the central and western Aleutians. Taking us down to 3,000 feet, with our low out way over in the western Bering. We have 15 to 20 knots out over the western Aleutian Islands out of a southwesterly direction, picking up to as high as 25 knots out over the central Aleutians, but dropping off pretty quickly to 15 out over the southern Bering. Right around our low, we have some of our strongest winds, 25 knots becoming 35 at a southerly direction as we get closer towards the Bering Strait. So look out over the state, pretty similar flow to what we saw at 9,000 feet, with a lot of our ridging going in with our high pressure there out of a southerly direction. Strongest winds near Kodiak Island, around 30 knots there, but diminishing as we get closer to our high, only 10 knots along the Arctic coastline out of a westerly direction. And then north to northwest flow coming down over the Panhandle area, picking up to as high as 20 knots there, and then getting stronger as it exits out further to the south, around 30 knots. For our turbulence, nothing out over the Panhandle with those weaker winds that we saw, but as we look out over the western part of the state, below 4,000 feet along the edge near Tin City, out over St. Lawrence Island, some moderate turbulence there expected, down by Cape Newingham, and then into the Alaska Peninsula below 5,000 feet there. And we are expecting these areas to shift slightly to the east as that frontal system pushes to the east as well for tomorrow. And we'll be back shortly with the marine forecast.
We have a big solar flare coming in, so we're out here on an aurora hunt. It's a CME, it's dynamite, coronal mass ejection. It's when the sun, it kicks off energy and these explosions that are larger than the Earth, explosion type things, coming off of sunspots. And if that energy is pointing straight at the Earth, it gets caught up in our magnetic field, and that energy, electrons, come down our magnetic field, collide with oxygen up there about 50 or a couple hundred miles high, and that's what generates the northern lights. My job as the photographer and the aurora hunter is to be in position, you know, location, location, location. And I like to think I'm composing. Mother Nature, it's a bit of a teamwork thing, you know, she's got to put on the show, but I have to be in the right position and of course with the right tools and the know-how. I've stopped keeping track of how much time I spend out here in terms of hours. It's more in terms of weeks or months, or at this point years now. You know, it was always in me. Even when I was a kid growing up in the lower 48, I would spend nights sleeping on our trampoline, just staring at the stars. I'm in 4th grade and I'm going, wow, look at those stars. And I'd see how many nights in a row I could sleep on the trampoline. And I think my record was 23 nights in a row. So I was doing kind of strange things for an Iowa country boy. I can remember specifically the very first time I saw the northern lights. It was 1989, the peak of the solar cycle, and I was going to graduate school in Laramie, Wyoming. And all of a sudden we had heard the northern lights were out. It's like, what are those? I'd never really seen them before. And my goodness gracious, we were on top of a mountain in the Laramie Range and they were turning blood red. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And the very first picture I took, that was 1990. Now, an old film camera, Pentax K1000 on a plastic Kmart tripod. Took 2 shots on slide film and got them back. And I thought, oh my gosh, this beautiful green thing swirling about. And from that moment, I was hooked. When I realized that you could preserve the auroras on film, I just experimented a ton. I'd had a heaping stack of slides, the no good ones. The experiments gone wrong, you know, too dark, fuzzy, out of focus, too light. I had this huge garbage can full of excess slide film, and that was just the learning curve. Well, when I go out here, it's all about getting the shot. And my wife and I, we've called it the hero shot. But the hero shot is the one where you just come home and you go, look at this. And everyone goes, wow, and you feel like a hero. It's a wonderful feeling, you know. It's always It's good for the ego, of course. It's good for the business. But if you kind of strip that away, it's good for what's inside you, because that's really the hero moment in nature. And Mother Nature's putting on this show that is just mind-blowing. It's unbelievable. When I first resigned from my day job, that was in 1996, and decided I wanted to become a full-time aurora hunter, my goal from that moment and to this day still is to get one hero shot a year. I figured, and I'm talking the kind that somebody wants to buy from you and hang on their wall, where the auroras are extremely bright, very active, turning colors, where you can't believe your eyes. If you get to preserve a little sample of that with a photograph, well, it's what we call the hero shot. Wow, what a feeling. I mean, you're elevated, levitating, you're lifted up. Your spirits are so high that I love that feeling. And I think I get that so much from seeing cool things in nature that I will go way out of my way to find that. And I can, the next day, well, I'll be just laying there thinking about it and thinking how lucky I was, or how fortunate. Of course, I just spent 2 weeks sitting there staring at the sky and not seeing anything, so you got to remember that luck is kind of a relative term, but I still just feel incredibly lucky to be even in a position to where I could have been there, taken a photograph of it, and just mainly experienced it. Well, that feeling could last for days.
Welcome back. We'll take a quick look at the ice edge now. We do have some sea ice there just north of Dead Horse and north of the Barrier Islands, in fact, and that is expected to continue to melt for the next couple of days. And then our main ice pack further to the north, rotating around in a clockwise direction. We are expecting that to remain pretty much the same as far as the ice edge is concerned for the next couple days. So you look now at the main part of the marine forecast, starting off in the southeast, primarily northerly flow, 20 knots out over the Gulf, getting up to as high as 25 knots as we get further to the north in the inside channels, down to around 15 knots further to the south, 3 to 5 feet in the inside waters, and up to as high as 7 feet as we get further to the south in the Gulf. Then as we move into Thursday, flow is going to continue to be primarily of a northerly direction, although dropping down to 10 to 15 knots in the Gulf, staying around 25 knots to the north in the inside waters, dropping down to around 10 as we get further to the south. Seas from 4 to 6 feet in the Gulf, highest as we get further to the south. For the south central, flow out in the Gulf area, pretty light, 10 to 15 knots there, out of more northerly direction as we get closer towards Prince William Sound. Then out over the inside waters, we do have through Cook Inlet, northeasterly flow, 10 knots becoming variable closer towards the Barrens and Shalikoff Strait. Then for Thursday, flow becoming a little bit stronger out of a more easterly direction for most locations. Around the Barrens, easterly flow, 25 knots there. Seas up to as high as 8 feet on the southeast side of Kodiak Island. And as we move up further to the north, dropping down to around 10 knots in northern Cook Inlet with 2 feet for seas. As you look out over the Alaska Peninsula, southerly flow getting as high as 25 knots on the Pacific side, other places around 20 knots. Seas highest on the Pacific side as well, 6 to 10 feet and 3 to 5 feet on the Bering side. Then on Thursday, flow becoming more westerly, dropping down to be around 15 to 20 knots with seas highest on the Pacific side, 8 to 9 feet. On Wednesday for the Aleutian Islands, pretty light flow for the most part out of primarily a southerly direction, 10 to 15 knots. With seas of around 6 feet until we get further out towards the east, getting up to as high as 8 feet on the Pacific side and becoming more westerly at that 10 to 15 knots. Then on Thursday, we have widespread southwest flow around 15 knots for all locations in the Aleutians, with seas highest on the Pacific side, 7 to 8 feet there, and 3 to 5 feet on the Bering side. Along the west coast of the state, stronger flow along the coastline with that frontal system coming up. Southerly flow 30 knots, becoming more easterly and up to as high as 35 knots as we get closer to St. Lawrence Island. And then in the central parts of the Bering Sea, a more westerly flow 15 to 20 knots. For Thursday, flow becoming lighter and now out of a more southwesterly direction, 10 to 15 knots most locations, stronger as we get further to the north, around 20 knots there. Along the Arctic coastline, we have flow out of around 10 to 15 knots most locations, somewhat of a southerly direction, becoming more westerly as we get closer towards Shishmaref. And then as we look into Thursday, all flow becoming easterly, 20 to 25 knots with seas around 5 feet in almost all locations. Taking a quick recap for the state panhandle area, just going to see some isolated showers for tonight in the very southern parts. Out over mainland Alaska, high pressure clearing out the skies, allowing temperatures to drop below freezing in a lot of places in the interior, extending down as far south as the Anchorage Bowl area. Freeze warning again in effect for tonight, 3 a.m. to 8 a.m. for the Anchorage Bowl, extending north to the Matanuska Valley. Along the Arctic coastline, we have some showers expected from Barrow to the west. And then our main frontal system pushing into the eastern Bering Sea, starting to bring rain and fog along the coastline of the Waikiki Delta into Bristol Bay, with some rain and fog behind the system as well throughout the Bering. As we move into Wednesday, that front is going to continue to push further inland, extending now into the lower Kuskokwim Valley, down into the Alaska Peninsula, and as far north, starting to get nearer to Galena, not quite getting there on Wednesday, and into the Nome area and areas further to the west, St. Lawrence Island. Rain and fog behind the system. Our high pressure now pushing off to the east, but still enough to keep a lot of clear skies for central eastern parts of the interior down into the south central. Some isolated showers up along the Barrow area. Panhandle should be pretty void of precipitation until we get further to the south. Some isolated showers expected there. Then our frontal system now on Thursday starting to break apart, but a new one coming into the Bristol Bay area, bringing rain through the south central Copper River Basin on Thursday, with some rain and fog out over the Bering Sea on Thursday as well. Thanks for being.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.